Yeah. So there we go. Welcome to the last of these 5 workshops on the RIBA stages. I'm still Dave Palmer. You may notice I'm now called Creating Homes Special Projects Manager. I still co-manage, but we've got a new manager coming in the end of next month to share with me. So today I want to talk about the last 2 stages, handover and closeout and in use. And just whilst we wait for other people to join, I'll just show some photos of a scheme that it went through on site. And you may recall this is Old Oak in Carmarthen, and that was the architect's drawing, Rio Architects, of the scheme as they envisaged it. The photo is of it as they were constructing it, with the house at the bottom, the little 2 at the bottom. This is a view from the back of the homes. And you can see, being in Wales, it's on a sloping site with retaining walls. And we dummied up a photo of a couple of residents laying bricks to go on the windowsills to get them more involved in the site. And it did actually win a TPAS award for residents' involvement. And this is one resident moving into his home, and he's hanging onto the porch, and we had aluminium guttering and downpipes specified rather than plastic ones for long-term maintenance and not vandalism. He's not hanging on to it, but the contractor, when he fitted the downpipes and gutters, they measured all the houses, and each one of them was in a couple of millimeters of each other. So they had built according, to the drawing and to the British standards I mentioned. So it was a successful scheme. So detail of the handover, stage 6, and it concludes all of the work and rectifying any defects that the clerk of works or the project manager, residents and the client have identified. And you prepare a schedule, and you've already determined any retention sum that may be held from the contractor. That is often 5–10% of the contract sum. You can build it up slowly after the stage payments, rather than take it from the first one, in that the contractor wouldn't get any payment on the site when he was starting. The defects liability period can be as short as 6 months. Typically, it's a year. But if there's a lot of landscaping on the site, they may want 2 years, or we want to get 2 heating seasons in. It can be longer. And legal definition, there's a defects liability, but there are also latent defects due to the design which don't come out during the defects liability period. So you may have to end up in court discussing that if you don't agree on it. And there's 6 years to be able to make a claim on something, and a lot of legal documents, they have to be kept for 7 years. That's normally what people do. When it's handed over, aftercare is initiated. You could have people cleaning communal areas, estate management, cutting lawns, common areas. Members of the court could do that. The construction team rectifies any defects, and it can, when residents are moving in, take the edge off if they've waited for the property and then defects have to be done. This caused a problem in one, the co-op I just showed you. The contractor was very tardy in doing the defects, and it spoilt their moving in for them. And you can do a survey with the clients, residents as they moved in. Co-ops will do their own survey. They'll know each other, be having regular meetings. But I think with Hope, your housing management, you'll probably go in 6-9 months after occupancy, as you do with first tenancy, just to make sure it's all right for the tenants and it's performing as it said it was. Sustainability targets and performance of materials, probably not going to have sensors in the building to check on energy consumption, but often the drawings show a certain construction and a performance tested by the building research establishment, but unless it's constructed exactly to that, it doesn't exactly perform the same way. There may be gaps around your window, bits of insulation missing. Sometimes they don't get it right into the corner up in the loft space. So you may see condensation appearing in a corner where there's no insulation, things like that. So the actual handover can be phased into the previous stage 5, where you have partial completion of the site and partial handover whilst units are still being constructed. And then you as the client become the main person responsible for that building, because the contractor's handed over to you and his insurance is gone. And for design and build teams, which is a different way of construction, they can still involve practical tasks and lessons learned. But whereas repeat of schemes is important to learn from one phase for the next phase. So stage 7 is in use, and this is where the community-led co-op, community-led scheme of management will take over. They will need to know about maintenance, the energy certificates of what's been put in, colleagues just leaving, general management of facilities. And I say architects are always interested in how the building performs. There may be a feedback, but will you be working with that client again? Will you work with that same architect? It may be 10, 20 years before you get to do the next phase. So it's very, very difficult to retain that long-term relationship with them. And if you do go back in 10, 15 years, it might be a different architect within the same practice that's doing it. And as long as they've got the records. The other thing is actually using things. If you've got mechanical heat and ventilation and it's passive house, you've got to make sure that the building's ventilated properly and using it, and they're not opening windows to override it. So it's just common sense, really. Another summary of it, and it's about its use over a lifetime. We've talked before about how long a building might last. It might be 120 years. It might be just 20, 30 years. And that's where the costs are, the maintenance of it. So you could then repeat the whole process with the next phase and with the same architect. And just at the bottom there is where I've got some of the information from: the Civils Guide, Urban Architecture and Architecture for London. Architects may not, traditionally they've been accused of not getting involved. But I think there's an opportunity for the residents to really take a grip and take hold of how the building is used and performed. And then they could go back to the architect and help them design another scheme somewhere else. If you're working with a housing association, hope, like you just said, the one scheme in Leominster, maybe those veterans could learn something from that scheme that could help stormwater in another scheme somewhere else within England where stormwater covers. So that, or down in Portsmouth where Downman is. So that skill is not lost within the wider community-led housing movement. May not be those residents that are going to live in the next scheme. They're not going to move from Leominster to Portsmouth, but you know, that learning can be captured within the stormwater organisation. So just some things about schemes, the maintenance of them. Liz asked for maintenance of properties in use, and I was going to ask anybody if they knew where this co-op was, but Casey's not with us, and it's actually Rest Bay Equity Co-op in Porthcawl, which was built about 30 years ago, and they're in the process of, well, they've changed the windows, they're now changing the kitchens internally. And I've got some spreadsheets, not for that particular scheme, but life cycle costings of building materials and elements. Roofs are 60 years, windows 25 years, kitchens, I say 10 years. But I know houses where they don't last 10 months. Also some houses where they've lasted 25, 30 years if people look after them. Communal decoration every 10 years. Hope maybe they do that more frequently in some places. Electrical stuff is 45 years, but now they're looking for regular testing every 5 years, and maybe with changes in electrical regulations, it will be more frequent than 45 years, maybe 25 years. And those are indicative costs of how much it would cost to change. And this is a spreadsheet showing those costs for certain elements based over a period of time. And this was where the blue line is 2016. We're now in 2021. So there's no actual work going on there in that one, but the kitchen is due to be done in this particular property next year. And that then builds up into a larger spreadsheet when you put the houses and flats together. And again, you can see that that work has been done in the houses there. There was nothing in the previous years, but things could have slipped and not done, or you could bring those forward if they wanted to be, if they weren't in a worse condition than you thought initially. And again, here on this summary, there's work in flats D, E, and F, and you'd want to make sure that was done. And this asset management is for 35 years, which will probably cover the maintenance period and the mortgage. and then you would then refinance with a different asset management based on the information that you've got. So that's a summary of that. These are just some photos of some of the schemes about people getting involved. The one on the left is a scheme in Cardiff, and it is, you know, kids and families moving in. The other one is the one in Cardiff, in Newport, sorry, with levels looking into the site. Make sure you can get access to the site. And then this is a tenant moving into the refurbished property in Tycuffler in Pontypool. Very happy with the colour coordinated stuff. And then just a social media tweet from the scheme in Cardiff saying that residents would be moving in. So people do get excited about it. This is the scheme in Newport where they all focused around the Christmas tree and then went back for mince pies afterwards. And that's the core of their community. And I will say, and this cliche, cooperation is not just for Christmas, it's for all year round, and it's all the time. There's a different skill starting the scheme off and a different skill maintaining it long term afterwards. So they have to sign up for the maintenance program that I just showed you. So in summary, how the RIBA stages relate to the 5 E's that the centre works to. And I've got Casey's little map of how it spirals up. So we're in the expand, educate and influence stage. Now you go out and tell people how wonderful it is. And I think being part of the community-led housing movement actually starts in the engage and explore. When you go and visit sites and you extol the virtues, you go speak to people, residents of how it actually works. So you're doing that from day one. So in a conclusion, the 7 stages, which are really 8 because you've got a note, are often broken down into 3 segments for pricing. The concept and design stages 0 to 3, sketch designs, technical and tendering, which is the more detailed stages and up to building reg and planning, and then 5 to 7, construction and conclusion, working on site, and probably any post work, no fee, which is perhaps why architects don't get involved. In terms of fees, it can be a percentage fee. And if I go back to the spreadsheets, if I can go back just a few, once it flashes back. And the bottom but one line on this asset management, so project management, 5%. So even when you're doing maintenance, it may cost £1,000 to do a kitchen, but then there's 5% project management on top of that. So it puts the cost up, plus VAT. And similarly with an architect, the larger builders will negotiate a fee per unit to get planning permission. Working with housing associations, they're allowed on costs, and that can be 17 or 18% on top of the build costs. And architects' fees would be part of that, along with structural engineers, legal stuff, ecology surveys. So you can see that there's a fifth almost added on to what you think the costs are going to be. It's not just the pure cost of the building, of the materials and whatever. And the last bit there is a link to full details of the RIBA stages. And I think Claire shared that link in the first, in the notes of the first one going out. But it's useful to be able to go back and look at it. So that, I think, is it. Time for a cup of coffee, unless there are any queries that people have. I can stop sharing my screen, but I'll still continue recording just for a short while. And apologies that Casey couldn't join us, nor others. It's obviously too excited in the Senate elections. They're seeing who's going to be the new ministers in the new assembly here in Wales, a week on from the election last week. So I hope that's been useful for you both.
Thank you. We've been looking for a site for a while, and actually we had a meeting this week with the head of estates, etc. And it looks possible that we have a council-owned plot of land.
Right.
That we may be able to work in partnership with them. So we don't know quite what that means, but we've been given the green light to, what was the first stage? The explore stage.
Yeah.
So that's very exciting from our perspective, because there's no way we could buy land. But we don't know quite whether they mean to lease or to that we have to purchase it. So we're very early days. So I'd be interested in your views about, or your experience about, how councils normally work with a community-led group. And then the second question is, we've already kind of partnered with a housing association on our first scheme that we didn't get. And we've also joined up with a developer who's very local and very well known and connected to our council. So we've got two bits running. You know, we've no idea what the usual setup would be between a council and a community-led group. And then examples where a community-led group has worked with a developer and a housing association from the outset.
Yeah. There is a national guide about working in partnership with local authorities for community-led housing. I'm sure.
Yeah,
Claire,
yeah, I've read that.
Claire and I can find that. And there are also CCIN cooperative councils. I'm not sure whether Portsmouth was one of those, but that's a document which shows schemes. You mentioned that there is a community-led hub down in Portsmouth, down that way, I think.
There's one in Hampshire.
In Hampshire, covering in Hampshire. We're a registered hub for Wales, and there is a network whereby we share experiences, and I can put you in contact with them, and you're happy to talk, directly with me about it at the centre, because it's all about the movement in the UK and across the border. Some housing associations, in our experience, are better at community-led schemes than others. Accord sometimes did some schemes, but sometimes housing associations can revert back to type with that housing management that Hope works in. If 95% of the work that they do is in a certain way, when they're dealing with a co-op, which may be 2 or 5% of what they do, they haven't got the skills to do it unless they've got a dedicated team which does cooperative schemes or community engagement. Who is the housing association in the area, Diamond?
The one that we've worked with is Vivid, which is a number of housing associations, including Portsmouth Housing Association. And I think you're right, the resources that they can provide are small, but we happen to have a chap who has the remnants of what housing associations were originally set up for, which is what we are now, really, to some extent.
Yeah, yes, exactly. They were set up as community-based organisations around communities, churches or whatever, but they tend to have been taken over. They become much larger. They got financial imperatives. They're driven one way by Homes England, and they lose what the basic community wanted. So I think I'll pause. I'll stop recording now, because I'm very happy to carry on talking. Not that I'm going to say anything that I don't want anybody to hear, and Claire can always edit the end of it, but I will stop recording. But we'll carry on.
That's good. Yes. So, I mean,